What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Wednesday, December 4th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. 6-game NBA slate tonight, 5 games starting between 7:30 and 8 p.m. Eastern, and then one island game later on, the Wolves taking on the Clippers at 10:30 p.m. Eastern. We did not long before this show started. We got Clippers injury news, which is actually really interesting, and I am excited to talk about that when we get to that game. But it was nice to not have to deal with Q tags there. We just got the news up front. So I will talk about all that. A little bit different format today because mostly of that Clippers news. I don't have what I would actually be playing in tournaments if it started right now, because I don't really have a good way of, didn't have a good way of getting ownership, because right now there's kind of just like different projections everywhere across the industry for players. So I didn't have any sort of really good way of getting meaningful ownership projections to use in creating my lineups. So I did just take my projections, figure out how often guys show up as being optimal, and then listed over here is the current SaberSim projected ownership, which we can use as a proxy just to see where ownership is likely to come in, what players maybe are going a little bit under-owned, and look at it that way as we go through game by game. So a little bit different just because it wasn't really going to be useful to run ownership saying that like nobody on the Clippers is going to be popular and I'm jamming them in when that's not going to be the case. So starting with Orlando taking on Philadelphia, one of the biggest injury questions on the slate is in this one. Goga Bitadze is questionable for the Magic. He missed yesterday's game. Don't know if he will play today. What we saw yesterday from a rotation standpoint is Tristan da Silva moved back into the starting lineup in place of Goga. You got 48 minutes at center from Wendell Carter Jr. plus Mo Wagner. It ended up breaking in Mo Wagner's favor. Carter played like 19 and a half minutes. Wagner played 28 and a half, something like 27 and a half, whatever 48 minus 19 and a half is. So if Goga's out here, I think that you project it not similarly in terms of Wagner playing all the minutes, but similarly in terms of them not really playing alongside each other or playing alongside each other at all and just splitting 48 minutes. So I would expect like 26, 27 minutes from Carter and 21, 22 from Wagner if Goga is out. If Goga is in, I projected it, and as you can see here, I did project it with Goga in. I went 28 minutes to Goga. He played 32 in the last game that he started, the last competitive game he started. His playing time can vary. Like if Mo Wagner's playing well, Goga will lose minutes. Potentially you start seeing Carter get more minutes at the 5. But based on the rotations we've been seeing, I went 28 for Goga, 27 for Carter, and then 19 for Wagner. So, obviously Carter playing alongside Goga and Wagner when he's starting at the 4. So that is big injury news that we are waiting on. Goga right now projected for about 12% ownership, showed up as optimal about 16% of the time for me. Pretty fair price tag at 5,100. It's really just a matter of there being a lot of volatility with his minutes because, like I said, he is subject to just different rotations where Mo Wagner plays well, which he's been doing a lot lately, and steals minutes from him. Or again, you get a little bit of a change where the Magic go a little bit smaller and Carter's playing at the 5 and you shift down the other positions. Like that stuff would cut into Goga if it happens. But again, a 28-minute projection isn't his ceiling either. We just saw him play 31 and a half, 32 minutes in his last game. So it's not projecting him to a ceiling. He looks like a good value here at 5,100 if he is good to go. Franz Wagner at 9,800, showing up optimal about 10% of the time for me. If Goga's in, I did knock a minute or two off of what we've typically been seeing from Franz Wagner, just because it does, add another body to that rotation. This team is getting a bit healthier with Carter back and playing pretty normal minutes. If Goga is out, possibly get to a 38th minute for Wagner, but I did already project 37. So still healthy projection on him. We've seen him obviously play really, really well this season, particularly without Paolo Banchero, who is of course still out. So on a lot of slates, $9,800 Wagner with nobody out wouldn't look that great, but it is only a 6-game slate. And you also don't have the best payoff options. You don't have Nikola Jokic on the slate. You don't have Luka Doncic on the slate. You don't even have like SGA on the slate. You really have the two guys from the Lakers, Anthony Davis and LeBron, and you have Giannis. And that's pretty much it as far as like the true pay up options. So it makes 9,800 on Wagner a little bit more appealing just because that raw upside that he gives you. It just becomes that much more likely that he's like the actual high scorer or second highest scorer on the slate compared to deeper slates where you have those other guys to get to. Wendell Carter, 5,100, power forward eligible, projected for 7% ownership, showing up optimal 8% of the time for me. I was pretty aggressive on his minutes yesterday, and I think 27 is still relatively aggressive here. He's topped that once in his games back. On the one hand, the fact he only played 19 and a half minutes yesterday is kind of concerning. Obviously would feel better if he had played more, but I still don't think that there are negative takeaways necessarily from the rotations there. Like I said, you just had Mo Wagner play well. You also had a non-competitive game at the end. Wagner stayed on the floor for a lot of the second half, or all the second half really, once Carter subbed out. But in the first half, you still got between 13 and 14 minutes from Wendell Carter. He was still tracking to play these 27, 28 minutes. So I still think he's a reasonable value here, especially at modest ownership and with power forward eligibility. So I like that. Jalen Suggs, Mo Wagner, KCP, all showing up somewhat, at sub 10% ownership or right around 10% in the case of Wagner. Wagner at 4,400, it's just kind of the same thing as it's a cheaper version of Goga, where if the rotation goes like exactly according to plan, you probably don't want Wagner. But at the same time, even 19 minutes of Wagner at 4,400, there are going to be some games where he just gets it done anyway. But the nice thing about him in tournaments too is if he is playing well and producing, if he's playing well, he's probably producing fantasy points. And if he's playing well, it's more likely that he finds his way into additional minutes as well. So there is minutes volatility on him, which is nice. It's not like he can't steal minutes from the guys ahead of him. It's different than the backup center situations where like you play Jalen Smith behind Vucevic. Jalen Smith is almost never like actually taking minutes away from Vooch unless Vooch is in foul trouble. Or, Mo Bamba with Zubac, same kind of thing. If Mo Wagner plays well, the Magic can very easily just say like, okay, Goga, enjoy your time on the bench. We're leaving Wagner out there. And we've seen that they will do that. So the upside on him is really nice. KCP typically just giving you 32 to 34 minutes at 4,200, decent value, but obviously not a very good point per minute guy. One other thing I want to highlight on Jalen Suggs from a playing time standpoint is just that Orlando has been in a lot of blowouts lately, and Suggs also has a game mixed in recently where he was in really bad foul trouble. So his minutes are volatile, but I think it would be a mistake to just look at recent game logs and say, like, oh, well, he played 39 yesterday, but before that, he was only playing 27 a night. 39 was a fluke. Like, I think 39 obviously isn't what you're going to normally see from him, but I do expect 32, 33, 34 minutes from him more often than not in competitive games where he's not in foul trouble. We just haven't seen many of those lately from Orlando. Also, if Goga is out, it does have a somewhat positive effect on guys like Jalen Suggs and KCP. And I mentioned it, Franz Wagner as well, just because they don't want to play, very clearly don't want to play Cole Anthony a lot of minutes. You're not getting a ton of minutes for Jet Howard. Jonathan Isaac only played like 12 or 13 minutes yesterday as well. He'd only played a little bit the game before that too, but he was in foul trouble. But the point being here, like they don't have a bunch of bench guys just lined up that they're going to look to give a bunch of minutes to if Goga's out. You're just going to get Wendell Carter playing all of his minutes at the 5, and it's going to open up some more playing time as a result for the other main pieces in the starting lineup. So slight positive impact on those guys if Goga's out from a playing time standpoint as well. On the Philadelphia side, still no Joel Embiid. Paul George is out. Kyle Lowry is out. I don't know what the starting lineup's going to be here. This is, one of the first games on the night, so we'll find out. My guess when I did my projections is Tyrese Maxey, Jared McCain, Kelly Oubre, KJ Martin, and Yabusele. It could be anybody over McCain. It could be Caleb Martin over McCain. It could be Caleb Martin over KJ Martin. But that's my guess for right now. You can see here, no projected ownership coming into Jared McCain. That's just a function of, I assume SaberSim doesn't think he's going to start, or however their ownership algorithm works, like whatever sites they're using their projections don't have him projected to start. I have no idea. But this is an example of why I didn't bother figuring out my tournament exposures, because if you put a 0.5% ownership projection on Jared McCain with the way that I have him projected, he's just going to end up in like every lineup, when realistically ownership by lock is just going to be closer to where it should be. So Jared McCain, the way I have him projected right now, showing up as optimal about 11% of the time. Same goes for Tyrese Maxey at 8,900. I expect about 34 minutes from McCain if he starts. If he comes off the bench, obviously that number goes down. Maxey likely to give you 37 or so, just playing big minutes again now that he's back in the lineup. Assuming Kelly Oubre starts, he looks like a pretty solid value at 5,300, showing up as optimal around 11% of the time as well. Yabusele has plenty of minutes available to him, but he is 6K, not the best point per minute guy. I projected 32 minutes, which I think is a little bit higher than other places I've looked in the industry. Still only getting him as optimal about 7.5% of the time, but that is higher than his 4% projected ownership. The reason that I'm a little bit more optimistic on the minutes is the absence of Paul George specifically, because Paul George being out after playing 37 minutes last night means that you have to allocate more of the like Caleb Martin, KJ Martin minutes to playing the 3 or playing the 4, as opposed to going to small ball lineups. And I don't think Adam Bona is just going to step in and play 18 or 20 minutes or something like that. So because it's more difficult for them to play truly small, and also Orlando's a big front court, I think that you have the potential to get one of those big playing time games from Yabusele. So I am a little bit higher on his minutes. But again, at 6K, it still doesn't make him look great or anything. A couple of cheaper pieces here that I think are somewhat interesting in tournaments. KJ Martin, 3,900. Again, I projected him to start, so I gave him 26 minutes. He only played 22 minutes in his start last night. But again, Paul George being out and Kyle Lowry being out just means that you're likely to see more minutes from him and all of these other kind of fringe guys. If he is confirmed starting, I assume he has some level of ownership here, probably in the 3 to 5% range where he's showing up as optimal. But Ricky Council is interesting to me. I'm assuming he comes off the bench, but we've actually seen his playing time ramp up lately. He didn't play a ton yesterday. You had Lowry back, but in the games before that, Council played 27 minutes on the 30th, 27 minutes on the 27th. Both of those games were without Caleb Martin and without Kyle Lowry. And the game on the 27th also was without Paul George. He played 19 minutes on the 24th without Lowry or George. So you did have Martin, who only played 13 minutes in that game. But I think that you can get some additional run from Council. He's been getting minutes playing ahead, really, of Eric Gordon lately, which is a change from where things were earlier in the season. So I projected 22 minutes here. That could be kind of aggressive. I wouldn't be shocked if he played 18 or 20, but if he plays well, I wouldn't be shocked if he played a little bit more too. I'm not positive that Eric Gordon is playing. I gave him 10 minutes. I'm not positive Reggie Jackson's in the rotation. I gave him 7 minutes. So there are minutes here where Council could steal them from people. KJ Martin's minutes aren't set in stone. Jared McCain's minutes aren't set in stone. So just the fact that they have been playing Council a bit more recently, he's clearly had a spot in the rotation. I think that he's kind of interesting at 3,800 in large field tournaments, not a high priority play or anything like that, but just the kind of guy where, if you think about yesterday's slate where teams at the top had KJ Simpson at no ownership and minimum salary, basically, it's similar to that in that the minutes for basically everybody on this team outside of these top 3 or 4 guys are pretty volatile. And so there is the chance for Council to just step into more minutes than anybody's going to project for him. So dart throw type guy, I think, in larger field stuff. Moving on to Indiana and the Brooklyn. No Andrew Nembhard today for Indiana after playing yesterday. Don't know what the starting lineup's going to be here. I projected it to be Quentin Jackson in place of Nembhard. I think that's what most places have projected right now. It could be somebody else. 2 games ago, we saw Nembhard play in the first half and then sit the second half, and they started Jackson, but he immediately came out and they went to TJ McConnell. Last game yesterday, Nembhard again didn't play in the second half. They started Jarris Walker. This is again one of the early games, so I'm not super concerned about having the lineup correct right now. I just went with the default of what they had been doing prior to Nembhard coming back, and that does give you a decent value in Quentin Jackson at 3,600. His playing time in those games was kind of sporadic. But in the most recent game he started, he only played 16 minutes. He was in really, really bad foul trouble in that game. In the 2 previous games, he had played 32 minutes and closed. I projected 26 here, but I do think that if he's playing well, there is the potential for him to play more, assuming he starts. even at 26 minutes, he looks like a pretty solid value at 3,600. Halliburton and Miles Turner both looking pretty good. 8,200 for Halliburton, showing up 14% of the time. Miles Turner showing up 11%, pretty much in line with ownership there. Miles Turner's minutes have been up. I know I talked about it recently on a show that Moses Brown has basically not been in the rotation, which has meant Obi Toppin playing more minutes and being the backup center. And it's also translated in competitive games to more playing time for Miles Turner as well. He played 38 minutes yesterday. I'm not projecting that on the second half of a back-to-back, but I did go 34 here. Whereas if you just take like his season average or look at kind of what they were doing earlier in the year, it would probably be around 32. So I am a little bit more aggressive on Turner's minutes just based on how Indiana's rotations have looked lately. Obi Toppin, I projected for 21 minutes. He's not projected for any ownership. I have him as optimal 10% of the time. He's only 3,600. He only played 15 or 16 minutes yesterday, but he only played 4 first half minutes because he picked up 2 fouls and got benched. He obviously was really productive, still had like 30 fantasy points, but the rotations that we've seen from Indiana that I was just talking about benefiting Miles Turner also benefit Obi Toppin, because when Moses Brown was getting backup center minutes, Obi Toppin was pretty much just locked in to playing like 15, 16 minutes a night. Whereas now there are minutes available to back up 2 different positions, which just gives him more minutes and also more productivity when he is, the biggest guy on the floor, basically, when he's getting his backup center minutes. So I do like Obi Toppin at 3,600. Siakam, 7,800, I think looks fine, showing up as optimal about 9% of the time. And then you just get some lower probability plays here. TJ McConnell at 4,800, the same thing that TJ McConnell basically always is. But Nembhard being out certainly is a little bit of a bump as far as the playing time that you can project. But we know McConnell's a good point per minute guy. It's just a matter of how many minutes McConnell gets. Jarris Walker at 3,800. I only projected him for 21 minutes, assuming he comes off the bench. If he starts, I would obviously project that to be higher. But as is right now, getting similar ownership to Quentin Jackson, I think is reasonable, but I do think Jackson looks like the better play the way that I have them projected at the moment. You could make the case, and I think some sites might be projecting it this way, that it could be like, 23 or 24 minutes to Jackson and 23 or 24 to Walker, in which case they would look very, very similar. But, like I said, I think I'm just a little bit more bullish on Jackson's minutes if he starts based on the rotations that we were seeing when he was starting previously. So I did project him to play a little bit more than Walker, even though Walker's playing time has been up lately. Who starts this game will, I think, be pretty telling. Benedict Mathurin should play a bunch of minutes. He is up to 7,100 though. So I think the field's got it right at like 5 to 10% owned. On the other side, half of Brooklyn is still questionable. I don't even really know how to talk about this one. Cam Johnson is questionable. Dorian Finney-Smith is questionable. Ben Simmons is questionable. Cam Thomas is still out. Zaire Williams is still out. So this is one where we just need more information. For now, I projected all of the questionable guys in, and it just gets me to some Cam Johnson. It gets me to some Schroeder. I don't mind taking some shots at Daron Sharp. His minutes are volatile, though. We saw like 16 minutes as the backup center last game. If all the questionable guys are in, there's no guarantee Sharp is in the rotation. Like, you could have them prioritize Tyrese Martin's minutes and Tyrese Martin's minutes, and like Watford's the backup center. Sharp's not even in the rotation. My guess is that Martin ends up being the one out of the rotation in that case. And so I did give Sharp 16 minutes, but that could be wrong. You could also get like more minutes for Shake Milton and Keon Johnson with Ben Simmons as the backup center or Cam Johnson as the backup center. Like, there's a lot of ways that this projection could be wrong, but at the same time, if it's right and he doesn't have any ownership, he is a very good point per minute guy, so I wouldn't mind that. Finney-Smith, Simmons, Claxton, all kind of just filling in a little bit. If all these guys are in, you do get the situation where this team is kind of healthier than they have been in a while. So the pricing isn't going to look super great. If you start getting guys ruled out, obviously other players look better. If Cam Johnson is out, you basically have no high usage guys on this team other than Dennis Schroeder. So you would really see the offense running through him. He is up to 7,500 though. Keon Johnson at 4,500, Shake Milton at 4,200. If guys start getting ruled out, they can start looking like decent values. But there is just a lot of news we're waiting on here, and it would take me 30 minutes probably to go through every if-then for this team. So just keep an eye on the news there. Detroit taking on Boston in Boston. Massive spread in this one. This is the only game on the slate that doesn't have a pretty tight spread, like 14.5 points. So there is obviously blowout risk here. But Boston is a team that plays down to their competition a lot. And also, I'm I'm not taking anything from it really, but they beat the shit out of Miami in their last game, and they still were playing their starters until there were 2 minutes left in the game on the second half of a back-to-back. You had Derek White, who had just missed the game with injury, stay in the game until there were 2 minutes left. Jason Tatum ended up playing 36 minutes in a completely non-competitive game. So I only bring that up to mention that something, that I've mentioned a lot, that not only are all blowouts not created equal, but there is still like just random variance too, even if you do get that 25, 30-point blowout where for whatever reason, the coaches just say like, screw it, I don't care. I'm still playing my guys for a lot of minutes. David said, wasn't that for the cup though? No, it was just a random game on like Monday. It was not a cup game. On the Detroit side, obviously the more concerning team from a blowout standpoint, because if they get blown out to the point where they lose a lot of minutes, they are not playing well. No, point differential didn't matter. It wasn't a cup game. The cup games are on Tuesdays and Fridays. The game was on whatever was on Monday. So yeah, it didn't matter. For Detroit, no ownership coming into this team. And I mean, I think that's fine. You can clearly make an upside case for Cade Cunningham at 9,700 on a slate where you don't have a ton of pay up options. Tobias Harris, 6,500. Noah Sarr Thompson today for the Pistons. That is a slight benefit for Tobias Harris. He actually played a lot of minutes in their blowout loss yesterday, but generally when Thompson's in and this team's healthy, you're probably going to see like 30 to 32 minutes for Tobias Harris. Without Thompson, you do get the potential, if the game is competitive, for him to play like 34, 35. I projected 32 here again because of the spread. But if you wanted to go to, either of those guys because they're not owned, fine, but don't expect much. When things go well, though, obviously they can look really good. Same goes for a $4,100 Tim Hardaway, $6,100 Duran, Ivy at $7,900. I think is really tough to get to with Cunningham back. But point being, this whole team, I think, is basically just a contrarian tournament team where if maybe they keep it close, then you just get Cade Cunningham at no ownership, which would be great. But it is obviously a tough matchup, 103 team total and massive spread here. On the other side for Boston, Drew Holiday and Jason Tatum are both questionable. They did both go through shoot around. My assumption for right now is that they are playing, which gets this team back to full strength. Their last few games, they've had guys in and out of the lineup. But if these two are in, you're getting Drew Holiday, Derek White, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Kristaps Porzingis in a game where they're very, very heavy favorites. Tatum projected for 8% ownership, $10,200, showing up as optimal about 12% for me. Again, you're running the risk of him potentially not playing the fourth quarter, but also a pretty good chance that if that happens, he at least gave you a decent game. And it is only a 6-game slate too. So the opportunity cost is a little bit lower, makes him look a little bit better than he would if this were a massive game. Avery said, watch out for the Cade late scratch. Yeah, we got that on their last back-to-back. Certainly something that, could happen here. Jaylen Brown, 16% ownership at $2,000 less than Tatum. I think he looks fine. It's been this way for years now, where Tatum's always going to project better than Brown, obviously, but Jaylen Brown can just take over games, and if he's the hot hand, Tatum will kind of get out of the way. So the ceiling for Jaylen Brown is really high. 7K Porzingis, center only, which sucks. I mean, it's correct, but sucks from a DFS standpoint. We did get 32 minutes from him, so I don't think there's any sort of real minutes restriction at this point. They ramped him up pretty quickly. They were never that cautious with him. I projected 29 minutes here again because of the spread, but if this game were to stay competitive, Porzingis is probably playing a lot. He's a really good point per minute guy. He is 7K. Like, there is plenty of upside for him. You just need to hope that he plays in the fourth quarter. Derek White, 6,600. Getting 19% ownership seems a little high to me. Again, if this game's competitive, you're probably getting like 35 from Derek White, which would be nice. Especially at 6,600, but he has as much blowout risk as any of these other guys. He's not showing up as often for me as the field. I think he's a perfectly fine play. I just don't think that he's as good a play as it seems like the field does, at least using these ownership projections. Drew Holiday at 5K. He's been playing a lot of minutes lately. I do think it's interesting to point out he's been awful from a fantasy standpoint in those minutes, and he's been tanking my lineups pretty much every slate because I've projected him for those minutes the industry hasn't. So like he shows up as a really good play and then I just get burned because he sucks. But he played 29 minutes in the last huge Boston blowout. He didn't even play into the fourth quarter of that game. Still got to 29 minutes. And then in his other games recently, the games that have been more competitive, Drew Holiday has played 34, 36, and 37 minutes. So his season average is only 31 minutes per game, but over his last 5, averaging 34 minutes per game, you have seen the playing time ramp up. He is still dirt cheap here. As much as he has struggled lately from a fantasy standpoint, the games where he plays 34 plus minutes, like he just can't be 5K. So I am still interested in him in tournaments. But again, same blowout risk as everybody else here. Pritchard on DraftKings still reasonably priced at 5,500, probably playing like 26 or so off the bench. Do keep in mind that assuming Drew and Tatum are in, we do have the fully healthy starting lineup. So Pritchard's playing time recently has been skewed by, Hauser being out. Brown, I think, missed a game. Porzingis missed a game. Drew missed a game. White missed a game. A couple of those guys in the same game. But point being that if the questionable guys are in, Pritchard still is likely to play a good chunk of minutes, but less than in his recent games. Lakers taking on Miami in Miami. No Austin Reeves again for this one, which probably means D'Angelo Russell in the starting lineup. That's not set in stone. They did get absolutely destroyed last game with D'Angelo Russell in the starting lineup. We know that JJ Redick is not particularly partial to playing D'Angelo Russell a lot of minutes, as he has shown this year. So it wouldn't be shocking if you got somebody else in the starting lineup. But for now, nothing really to do other than project D'Angelo Russell in the starting lineup, in which case he looks great. I projected him for 34 minutes. He played a ton in that start against Minnesota, where they did end up losing by a lot. He's a good point per minute guy. That's never been the issue. The issue with him is more so his real life deficiencies and how long JJ Redick can stand to watch them. But assuming that he's on the floor, he's going to look like one of the best values on the slate at 4,900, projected for 32% ownership, showing up as optimal 26% of the time for me. And again, a reminder that in NBA, you're not actually trying to build the optimal lineup like you are in, showdown sports. It's a fool's errand. You're not going to do it. You're going to just make a lot of bad lineups in the process. So seeing something like this where Russell's quote unquote over-owned, but still has a really high chance of being in the optimal lineup, what that basically is telling you is that Russell is somebody that you probably should be building around and then, finding some lower owned guys to mix in with him, as opposed to just trying to only play guys that are projected to be under-owned, because that's just going to lead to some really shitty lineups usually. LeBron James, 20% projected ownership at 9,500. Hasn't been playing well lately, particularly by his standards. Still, probably a top 25 player in the NBA, but by his standards, that's awful. You've seen the Lakers play worse when the offense is running through LeBron, basically, as opposed to Anthony Davis, which, again, it's LeBron's very good. Anthony Davis is better at this point. So maybe that changes sooner than later, and they go back to, force feeding Davis and winning games. But either way, 9,500 for LeBron on a 6-game slate with power forward eligibility looks pretty good. 20% projected ownership, 23% optimal rate for me. No Reeves does also just kind of increase the playing time at least a little bit, probably for LeBron. I think I would have projected 34 minutes if you were in. I projected 35 with him out. Dalton Connect, 4,700. Jake had just said, is he a pivot to D'Lo? Yeah, you can play him with D'Lo too. Like, that's the other thing is, like, when you say a pivot, sure, if you have a lineup where you have a bunch of popular guys anyway, and then you need a player in this 4,500 to 5K price range, and so you don't want to take on D'Lo's 32% ownership, yeah, you can play Dalton Connect. But I also wouldn't view them as just like a pivot in the sense of Dalton Connect like negatively correlates with Russell, because he doesn't. You can just have games where they both do well. You can have games they both do poorly. But yeah, I think that Dalton Connect does look fine here. One thing to like about him in tournaments is that he is another guy, kind of like I was saying with Mo Wagner, but obviously his median playing time projection is higher than Wagner, but he's still somebody else that kind of like creates his own destiny, where if he goes out there and just like bangs 7 threes, he's not coming off the floor and he's playing 36 minutes. If he's not shooting well, he'll lose some minutes, but if he's not knocking down his threes, he wasn't doing shit for your fantasy lineup anyway. And it doesn't really matter to you if he plays 28 minutes or 26 minutes or 30 minutes if he's not making those threes. So it is always nice from an upside standpoint to have players like this, where if they play well, there are minutes available for them to take and to continue playing well, as opposed to guys that are, going to lose minutes to established players who aren't going to just stay on the bench. So there is that working in his favor. Shooting guard, small forward eligibility working in his favor as well. Rui Hachimura should play a bunch of minutes here. 4,800. I don't know why the ownership projection on him is so low. I assume that'll come up by lock. But he's been starting. He's been playing a lot of minutes. He played 42 games ago. Last game in the huge loss, he played like 17 first half minutes, played 29 total. He was playing huge minutes before his injury. I think that we're just back to Rui playing really big minutes here. And also he is somebody that, if the Lakers want to go small, like that benefits him as well. They don't have a backup center right now behind Anthony Davis. They went with Traore last game. It's been Koloko previously. Nothing's forcing them to play those guys. Like you could just get Rui on the floor a little bit more too. So I think he looks like a pretty good value at 4,800. I would expect his ownership to be higher than this. Anthony Davis, $10,500 price tag, does potentially benefit also for the same reasons I was just saying. I projected him for 37 minutes here. I think he plays a little bit more than LeBron. Obviously, he is more expensive, and he does come with a higher opportunity cost as well because he is center only, but he doesn't have a backup. He's also the guy that the Lakers need to play through if they want to win. And that's, become pretty clear. So I think he looks good if you can get there. It's really just a salary issue for him. Miami on the other side, Jimmy Butler is questionable. I saw somebody in chat a few minutes ago ask if he was going to play. I don't know. This is, even though it's the fourth game I'm talking about, it is still a 7:30 game, so we'll know before the slate starts. But I projected Butler in for now, which we still have a few good-looking plays on this from this team. Tyler Hero getting 18% ownership at 7,600. Playing time for him has just been huge lately. I don't anticipate that changing. This game has a 2 or 3 point spread, so it's as safe as you're going to get from a blowout standpoint. Obviously, they still happen, but Jason Tatum was just ruled out, so I will double back to the Celtics. Drew Holiday also ruled out, so that's going to open some stuff up there. I'll double back after I finish with Miami. So Tyler Hero is going to look good here. Bam, I think, looks good. 24% projected ownership is a bit higher than his optimal rate, but that probably just has to do with the fact that he is center only. But Bam's been playing huge minutes lately. Again, likely to be a competitive game. So I think expecting 36, 37 minutes from him makes a lot of sense. He looks fine. Jimmy Butler, if he's in, is going to look pretty good at 7,500. If he's out, we got Jaquez starting in his place last game. He's 5K. He would look fine if Butler is out. But assuming Butler is in for right now, those are the three that I'd be looking to the most. I would have some interest in $4,900 Terry Rozier as well, though. He's been playing off the bench. I assume he's still coming off the bench today. But in their last competitive game, he did get up to like 29 minutes, 28 minutes with Jimmy Butler in. Played 22 last game, but had played 25, and then got up to 29. And that was a game with Butler in. There's a good chance he's in the closing lineup of a competitive game and that you get a lineup with Hero, Butler, Rozier, Adebayo, and then one of anybody else, whether that's Duncan Robinson, Haywood Highsmith, doesn't really matter. So I do think that Rozier probably is closing for this team, even though he isn't starting. And that does mean that you can be a little bit more aggressive with his minutes. Ownership probably ends up higher than 0%, but I do think at 4,900, he is underpriced here. All right, so now to double back to Boston and see what I can do kind of off the top of my head. Without Tatum or Drew, obviously you're looking at more production from Brown and Porzingis. You're also looking at the game being competitive, more likely to be competitive than it was when they're fully healthy. They're obviously not as good without Tatum and Drew. So there is that. Brown's going to look better. White's going to look better. Porzingis obviously looks better. Peyton Pritchard, I assume probably doesn't start. They don't typically start him. We saw them go with Walsh the other day. We saw them go with Hauser. I assume Pritchard's going to go off the bench, but still play a lot of minutes. So at 5,500, he's going to end up looking good here. I think, I haven't looked today. I think he's more expensive on FanDuel, and he'll still look good there. Just 5,500 on DraftKings is a misprice. My guess at the starting lineup is White, Hauser, Brown, Horford, Porzingis. So you're getting more minutes from Horford, who has power forward eligibility and is 4,900. He's going to look like a pretty decent value. Hauser at 4,500 probably plays like 30 to 32 minutes. he'll look like a decent value. And then you're probably getting like 32 to 36 minutes from Pritchard off the bench. Or I should say 30 to 36. Overall, off the bench this year in these spots, he's averaged a little above 30 minutes. But we saw the other day he has 36 minute upside. So I think that, yeah, you just get a lot of guys that look good here for Boston. Everybody on the screen that isn't Jason Tatum or Drew Holiday looks better than they did when I ran this stuff. And, guys like Pritchard and Hauser are going to look a lot better than they did when I ran this stuff. Beyond that group, I talked about it the other day, but we have seen Drew Peterson actually be a rotation piece when they're shorthanded. He played 25 minutes in a similar situation the other day. Then I was surprised Walsh started over him the next game, but Walsh only played 13 minutes while Peterson played another 26. Not anybody I want to go crazy with here, but again, just pointing it out because that has been the trend for Boston lately, is that Peterson is the first guy up of the non-rotation guys, only a 0.72 fantasy point per minute guy, and also, not guaranteed to play a bunch of minutes, but did just want to mention that from a rotational standpoint. So that's my update to Boston. Possible that I messed something up there because obviously I hadn't prepared for that, and it was kind of just all off the top of my head, but I think it all checks out and sounded right. Moving to Atlanta and Milwaukee, but first a reminder to sign up for Endgame Syndicate if you have not already. Link for that is in the description below. That's the site that I started with Uticow, Brick75, and Nerdy Tenor. It has a bunch of strategy videos, a bunch of instructional videos up on the site talking about a lot of different topics, how we approach different sports, how we go through things process-wise. I personally have a video up just going through my lineup building and selecting process using SaberSim from start to finish. So videos like that, if you're somebody that takes DFS seriously and is at a point where you're trying to get better, but there's obviously a lot of things that you have thought of that maybe work, maybe don't. We put this together thinking about kind of what, in my case, what did I wish existed 5 years ago when I was spending a bunch of time and sometimes losing money, experimenting with things, trying things out. You have 4 people that play differently. We all approach DFS differently. We all have different skill sets. So kind of no matter how you think about it, how you approach it, there's somebody that you can bounce ideas off of that can tell you what they've tried, what's worked, if they think that you're onto something or not, or whatever it may be. Also, monthly roundtables for members. We have one coming up shortly, just answering whatever member questions you have about DFS. They start out on this channel in front of the paywall and then move behind the paywall for the member questions. We will have one of those coming up shortly, so good time to get in if you haven't already. Link is in the description below. Now moving on to Atlanta and Milwaukee. Only about a 5-point spread, 4-point spread on this one, so it looks likely to be a pretty competitive game. And you do have some favorable pricing here on Atlanta. Bogdan Bogdanovic is only $4,400. His relative value obviously does come down a bit now that we just got Holiday and Tatum ruled out. You're adding somebody like Pritchard at 5,500 into the mix as a really good value play, somebody like Hauser as well. But Bogdanovic has been playing 25 to 28 minutes off the bench. He is capable of being in the closing lineup. We haven't really seen that yet outside of, I think, one game he closed with DeAndre Hunter. It has typically been DeAndre Hunter coming off the bench and then closing over Scherer in most competitive games, but that's not set in stone. It's not something that always has to happen. You will probably get some games where Bogdanovic plays a little bit more than his 25 or 26 minute average. And at 4,400, you're kind of just getting a basement price on him. So I think that he's a good value here. Trae Young, 8,800. It's Trae Young at a pretty fair price tag. You know what you're getting from him. He's likely to play 34, 35 minutes. He's obviously a very good fantasy producer. DeAndre Hunter, 4,900. Decent value, but is going to look a little bit worse given the Boston news now. Jalen Johnson at 8,400. Plenty of upside there. One concern that I do have is that his playing time has decreased a little bit. Not to say that he's not playing a lot of minutes, because he still is, but you're seeing a lot more 35-minute games as opposed to the 37 and 38-minute games that you were getting earlier in the year when this team was less healthy. We actually only got 32 minutes from him last game, as Scherer played more minutes, played 24 and a half instead of his usual 20 and a half. So I'm not overly concerned there, but I am, projecting 35 minutes to Johnson now, whereas I used to project 37 or 38 even. So that is something to keep in mind. Dyson Daniels still playing big minutes, but his salary has come up. And then you're getting the really annoying center rotation split with Clint Capella and Okongwu combining for 48 minutes pretty much every game. And your guess is as good as mine who gets the better end of that. This is a matchup where if they wanted to, they could actually play them alongside each other, but they haven't been doing that this year. And given that they are at full strength right now, I don't anticipate that happening. But it is one where if they wanted to, they could. But I think Bogdanovich looks like a good value. Trae Young, solid pay-up option. And then getting into some Hunter, Jalen Johnson, Daniels, Capella, all those guys look reasonable. On the Milwaukee side, Giannis, highest projected guy on the slate, also the most expensive on the slate at $12,100. Showing up as optimal 18% of the time. That might actually go up with the Boston news. I'm not sure, just because you did get some more value opening up. Obviously, you did get other mid-range plays looking better too, though, with White, Brown, and Porzingis. So not sure the impact it'll have on the optimal rate, but clearly if you can get to Giannis. Should play 35 minutes or so. Clearly a great fantasy option. Not a whole lot to say there. Dame playing huge minutes, 9,600 is expensive, but he's been playing a ton of minutes. I think, 12% ownership, give or take on him, looks pretty good. 6,300 for Brook Lopez. He has been playing a lot lately, so he does have that working for him. But center is just a pretty deep position. I think he's just kind of a secondary option here. Nothing else that really stands out. 3,900 for Taurean Prince, 3,800 for Gary Trent. If you want to mix those guys in, sure. Just kind of, hoping to run good on minutes and or Gary Trent knocking down some shots, but neither one is going to look like a priority. And then wrapping things up with what turned into a very interesting game between Minnesota and the Clippers. On the Minnesota side, we have been getting a very tight rotation from them, basically playing 8 guys. Rob Dillingham is out again, so you don't even have to worry about him, reemerging in the rotation. Mike Conley getting 21% ownership at 4,800. Naz Reid getting 21% ownership at 4,600. I do think they're both good values. One thing that's nice about Reid too is that he's been playing every single backup minute behind both Rudy Gobert and Julius Randle. So it just opens the door for a lot of different ways for him to get more minutes, especially because Julius Randle's minutes have been trending down a little bit as well as Minnesota tries to figure out exactly how to get this team to gel together. So Conley and Reid both looking like pretty good values. 6,600 on Rudy Gobert. Fantasy production this year hasn't been as good as usual because his usage is down. While he's not a high usage guy, he is very efficient. So dropping from 16% to 12% does still make a pretty big difference. But you're still getting a lot of rebounding upside. You're still getting a bunch of block upside. And most importantly, you're getting huge playing time from him. He played 43 minutes in regulation in this lineup, or in this matchup rather, against Zubats last time. Clearly not projecting that, but he's just been playing 37 plus minutes pretty much every single competitive game. And I think still looks really good here. You're also getting some sites kind of just still using his 34-minute season average, which is insane, I think, based on the way rotations have been going lately. So Gobert looks good from a playing time standpoint. Hopefully, he gets 10 points, so you get your double-double. Anthony Edwards, 9,100, throw him in that bucket with Cunningham and Trey and these other, pay up options at guard that give you very high ceilings and decent medium projections. Nickeil Alexander-Walker and Dante DiVincenzo, from a value standpoint, are beneficiaries of this condensed rotation. When you had Rob Dillingham in there playing 7 or 8 minutes, it just made it more difficult for DiVincenzo or Alexander-Walker to get into the mid-20s. With no Dillingham and with Jaden McDaniels playing time coming down in the last couple of games, even excluding the game where he was in foul trouble, you're seeing Alexander Walker and DiVincenzo cut into those minutes a little bit more. So as a result, projected 25 minutes to each of Alexander Walker, DiVincenzo. I came down from projecting a normal 30 minutes to McDaniels down to 27. So it does make them look a little bit better, particularly Alexander Walker, who is only 3,900. And the nice thing about him too is that if kind of anything goes wrong, he can be that next guy up. If Conley gets in foul trouble or gets hurt or dies from old age or something, Alexander Walker steps up. If McDaniels gets in foul trouble, Alexander Walker steps up. If Alexander Walker is just playing really well, he gets more minutes. So I think he's another just kind of volatile sub 4K guy that is kind of interesting in your large field tournaments. And then now on the Clipper side, interested to see how these are actually showing up for me. You're going to get a lot of ownership coming into this team, and SaberSim did make that ownership update right before the show started. But this team's going to be popular. I still think they might end up being a little bit under projected though, because they ruled out 3 guys that aren't really DFS options. Terrence Mann is out. Kevin Porter Jr. is out, and then Norman Powell's out on the second half of the back-to-back. So I assume that Amir Coffey is going to move into the starting lineup replacing Powell, and you're going to go back to the James Harden, Chris Dunn, Amir Coffey, Derek Jones Jr., Zubats starting lineup. We've seen that, and I'm not sure that people are going to react as drastically to it as they should. This team is just missing minutes. Like they took even the last game that Norman Powell didn't play, taking out Mann and taking out Porter still removes like 44 minutes from the rotation. And they either have to give those minutes to guys that have already, been in the rotation and been playing, or they have to go really far down their depth chart. And I'm projecting this to be a 9-man rotation where Bones Highland moves into the rotation and he's, the guy that hasn't been playing but is in the rotation. But then you get more minutes for Chris Dunn, for Derek Jones Jr., for Amir Coffey, for Nick Batum, for Jordan Miller, and those guys all look better. But then I think the one that actually might be the sneakiest is James Harden, because we've seen James Harden in competitive games already, playing 37, 38 minutes, and his season average is lower than that because the Clippers have just been involved in a good amount of blowouts. So you could already make the case that in a game with like a 2 or 3 point spread, James Harden should be projected for like 36 or 37 minutes instead of 34 and a half or 35. But when you start actually going through and projecting out minutes for this team, you can see on the screen, I went 30 minutes for Chris Dunn. Like that's a pretty healthy projection. I went 30 for Derek Jones Jr., 32 for Coffey. Those are all healthy projections. 24 apiece for Batum and for Jordan Miller. It becomes like, do they just want to give more minutes to Bones Highland? Do they want to play, Trenton Flowers or whatever the guy's name is that I don't think has played a minute this season? Or do they just kind of want to do the simple thing and play James Harden 38 minutes? My guess is that James Harden's playing 37, 38, 39 minutes in this game if it's competitive. And I don't think his projection is going to come in quite as high for the industry as I think that it should, based on what I think his playing time is likely to be here. So I really like James Harden as a pay up at 9,400. And then, as a value, 3K Jordan Miller is going to look really, really, really good. 58% projected ownership here. I think there's a chance that his optimal percentage should be higher too. They probably didn't have the correct math stuff going on when I ran this. So I think that's why it's not even higher. But clearly going to look like a really good value. Dunn at 4K is a good value. Derek Jones Jr. looks good at 3,700. Zubats plays a bunch of minutes. He's not getting a lot of ownership. He has a high ceiling. Amir Coffey at 3,800 should play a lot. You can certainly go to Bones Highland at 3K. You can go to Batum at 3,300. Every player that I'm projecting for minutes here is at least viable. Obviously, different levels of viability for these guys. But even Mo Bamba in the just classic backup center case, where if Zubats gets in foul trouble, I don't think they have a whole lot they can do here outside of play Mo Bamba more minutes. They can give Kai Jones a couple minutes if it's really bad. But, he has that sort of contingent upside, to borrow from talking about football. But, any of these other guys that they're just all cheap. They're all underpriced for what their roles are likely to be. And, again, it's guys getting ruled out that are just kind of sneaky. It's not, it's not James Harden being out, and that obviously is being great for everybody, but because they are relatively shorthanded now, it does just make this whole team look really good. So pretty interesting slate. This island game at the end is going to make or break it. I think most likely you're gonna have a ton of ownership coming in there. So that's all I have for this one. As a reminder, injury wise, we are waiting on Brooklyn news. They have 3 questionable guys. We need an Indiana starting lineup. We need Goga's status. We need Philly starting lineup. But we did get the Boston clarification here. We need Jimmy Butler status. So there is going to be a bunch of news coming between now and 7:30 that does shake things up a bit, most likely. But that's how it looks for me right now. Thank you for checking out the show. I will be back at the same time tomorrow talking about tomorrow's, I believe, 8-game slate. So I will see you then. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up button on your way out, and good luck on your lineups tonight.